The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Stephen Sakach here with my co-host, Tullio, Siragusa, and our special guest today, who we'll introduce in a moment. So as organizations rush to implement AI, the challenge is clear. How do we innovate and integrate AI without eroding the human trust that business depends on? And today's conversation explores what it means to build trust with responsible AI, balancing innovation, privacy, and ethics in an era of acceleration. Tullio, introduce our guest today.
Absolutely delighted to do so. Today, our guest is Dominique Shelton Leipzig. Did I get that right?
Leipzig, but that's okay.
Leipzig. She's the founder and CEO of Global Data Innovation, Inc. Global Data Innovation is a legal advisory consulting firm for CEOs and board members. Executive leaders and boards engage global data innovation when facing their most complex and multifaceted challenges in AI, data, and cybersecurity governance to drive opportunities, reduce risk, and also build long-term value. Dominique is one of the world's leading experts on AI governance, data ethics, and privacy law. She has advised over 300 companies on responsible innovation, helping leaders align compliance with culture and performance. Very timely topic to have you as a guest today on the show.
Thank you for having me, Tullio.
So, Dominique, a recent IBM study found that 85% of CEOs believe AI will transform their operations, but less than 40% have a framework for responsible implementation. Why is there such a gap between adoption and accountability?
Well, there is, I think, a big misconception at the beginning that generative AI could be deployed as almost kind of a set it and forget it. You get the tools and it'll just work. And what we've seen unfold, Stephen, over the past almost 3 years here is AI trust issues, incidents sort of abounding, and a lack of return on investment because of that fundamental trust that's just not there with the customer base. And so I'm excited to talk about how we address that and turn that around.
Yeah, I think, one of the things as we kind of introduce AI into business, you don't realize that you're adding probably another layer of accountability you need than you that you didn't have in there before suddenly, right? It's like you had your systems in place, everything, going as is, and then now you've added this new thing in the mix, and sometimes it's a little bit of a wild card, right?
And you know what, Dominique, there's always the big question, especially when it comes to emerging technology like AI and others in the past. And this is always a big conflict, right? Because you've got the agility and the speed and the benefit of that you can get from the technology, but then you also have the challenges of governance, especially in regulated industries. So how do you balance that? That's, got to be a challenge in maintaining organizational effectiveness and building trust and governance while also taking advantage of the agility that this innovation brings to the table.
Yeah, and I think generative AI really gives us that opportunity to meld innovation with the accountability right from the get-go as we're building the tools. And so what we've seen is those companies who've been successful have had successful deployment, return on investment, showed real value to their employees, customers, investors. They've taken the trust route. They've actually built their tools to be fit for purpose, have redundancies to ensure accuracy, and can stand behind the product just as they would their own employees that they've trained. So I did a podcast where I was interviewing a CEO from Verizon Communications, and he said it so well. Just because AI does not have an employee ID and a badge doesn't mean that technology isn't as important to your brand, your reputation as an employee would be. So making sure the company's values are embedded are absolutely critical.
Yeah, I think that's even we see that in the marketing side is like we can tell a good story, upstream and say all kinds of nice things about your company, but then downstream in operations, if something happens that's just sideways to that, then everything just falls apart, right? Even in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about the good intentions that have gone into the 3 years that we've had generative AI deployment in companies, and studies like the MIT report that came out in August saying 95% of enterprise deployment of AI has failed. And I know, many technologists and companies take umbrage to that report and question, some of the statistics and how it was formed. But let's face it, Gartner, McKinsey, PwC all have come out with very similar studies. So we have an issue that we need to face and grapple with. And that means a whole reimagining of how we interact with technology and data. Change management that puts humans in the middle and first is really key and critical to the success of the technology. And we're seeing that every single day.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what are some of the early signs that an AI initiative might be undermining trust? Like, how does that show up?
Well, this is what I want to, talk to your listeners about. It's sort of hiding. It's this problem that's sitting in your company, and it's ready. It's like a powder keg. It's ready to blow up, and a lot of companies don't realize that this problem is there. So let me just talk about this. The AI technology is so powerful. It's done so many wonderful things. Early detection of pancreatic cancer. There's Dr. Fagenbaum who's using AI to have new uses of pre-existing drugs that are curing people for new diseases that no one ever thought of. So there's some wonderful things happening with AI, but it requires control and attention, because a critical issue is that AI is not a set and forget tool. It is constantly churning with new information, new data, and that means it's going to move and drift. So if the company doesn't have a process, governance to balance that out, they might find that the AI is drifting into areas that involve, recommending the wrong medication to people, recommending that kids that are speaking in loud tones in South Florida be considered violent risks and are pushed out of the school system. Situations where Medicare and Medicaid benefits are denied in error. In one of our big major states in Tennessee, after they spent $400 million on their algorithm, only to have a judge rule that that algorithm could not be used because it was denying Medicare and Medicaid benefits to the neediest Tennesseans 92% of the time. So you can't wait till it explodes. Governance needs to be in, and we can talk about that in a moment. Governance needs to be in place so that you can control outcomes, because it can move and shift at any time.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it can move and shift at any time. And it's not just like, oh, it just shifted, we got to fix it. It's fixed, right? Again, it's like one of those, I don't know, I always think of it like a zombie, right? Where it's just, there's actually these sea urchins off the coast of California that have just destroyed kelp beds because we lost our starfish, we lost our otters and all that. But they just sit there now waiting, and they'll wait 20, 30, 40 years for kelp anytime it grows. And it's a problem just waiting, right? So you've got these problems in businesses where it's just waiting in there like a little zombie sea urchin, waiting for you to, to ignore it again, and then it'll pop up and you're back to where you were before with another big problem.
It's a very complex challenge, right, Dominique? Because on one hand, you mentioned earlier about a lot of initiatives are failing or not generating the outcome. Most of it is just the way most organizations are structured. They're not set up to actually take advantage of AI, because AI thrives in autonomous types of organization, and most organizations are still structured like the Industrial Revolution. It's a very rigid command and control structure. So now you bring the super employee who can get things done fast, but you slow them down with rubber stamps of approvals along the way. It's not designed for that. It's designed to move forward. So ultimately it comes in and reveals all this dysfunction and it fails. But it's not the AI that failed. It's actually the organizational structure. So you got that challenge, old antiquated way of running businesses. And then you've got the other challenge, which is the compliance heavy, where for years people are programmed to just make sure they meet the basic requirements. Whereas AI actually has the ability where you can elevate your business to a whole nother level in terms of trust. You can actually direct intentionally beyond just the compliance checklist, where you actually can create trust with employees, with partners, with investors, with your end customers, and can do it at scale with empathy and with, dare I even say, love built into it. But a lot of companies are not seeing that opportunity because they're stuck in the old ways. It's like, this is the devil we know. How do you help them move beyond that mindset? Because that's a mindset problem as well, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So, to take the first thing in terms of the AI is just a reflection, a mirror of what is going on in the company already. So if there are antiquated procedures or there isn't a really clear understanding of policy, that's going to show up in the AI. If there are silos and there's a lack of communication on what is expected, that's going to show up in the AI. And I'm thinking about, one of our major retail pharmacies that had a situation where their vendor's AI was misidentifying paying customers as criminals, for example. And that issue, when it became public, the company already anticipated there were going to be lawsuits and there were going to be this and that. So proactively, they sought bankruptcy protection. But when you look at that scenario, let's take a step back. What if in building the AI, they had interviewed the supervisor for security and said, what are the monikers of theft or criminal activity that we look for inside the store? If we're going to physically follow, as a security guard, you're going to follow a customer in the store. It doesn't take a lot of heavy bureaucracy. I bet that security guard could tell you about 5 minutes exactly what they would look at. That information needs to be gathered and then coded into the AI itself or in an observability model so that the throughput of the company's values can be included. Why didn't that happen? Well, IT is in one silo. The physical security people are in another. And the CEO and board community, and this is where my company is really focused, have delegated away sort of the oversight because a lot of things they just don't understand. And so we're ending up with this sort of unsupervised situation that isn't hard to fix, but it's about bringing different groups together to work in a collaboration is what is necessary. So it's human standards inside the technology, monitoring and ensuring accuracy. And that's how we can move forward in this. But what's happening today, to your point, Tullio, it's like trying to drive a car with, not having wheels and getting onto the freeway and everybody just seeing what happens. You're going to have a problem. So nothing's wrong with the technology. It's human behaviors and how to operate and work together, because silos will not cut it for what needs to happen here to elevate to the point that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. The strange thing is IT has seen these patterns in the past where leadership says, let's implement this technology without doing the actual processes of human integration work. And then suddenly you're like, why is this failing? I remember back in the early 90s when everyone went with supply chain system like SAP, and 70% of those implementations failed. And they're like, what's the problem? The software is supposed to make our lives easier. And then you had the big four consulting companies came in and says, no, it's not the software. We have to map the software to the way you do business, like you were just mentioning. So you would think IT would have learned from these precedences that have happened with the technology evolutions in the past. And I think to many, I haven't spoken to a lot of CIOs and CTOs, they do raise the flag, but to your point, because there's so many silos, it's almost impossible to find common ground. And the CEOs have delegated or relegated this thing. So what's the solution? Should they be more involved? Should this be more of a CEO initiative in terms of making sure that this is working more appropriately? What's the opportunity in terms of how you advise your clients? Where do you guide them towards in terms of fixing that?
Yeah, so Tullio, it's a really great point. The tone of any company starts with the CEO and the board. All right. Those are the folks responsible for the CEOs developing the strategy, the board's making sure that that strategy, that everybody stays on track with that long term. And that's where the tone gets set at the top in terms of what are the values of the company, the mission, the purpose, and how you're going to proceed. Technology requires that tone at the top to be clear. And the CEO has to, you really can't lead something that you don't understand. So our boards and our CEO community do need to invest in their own knowledge about the tools and play around with the tools themselves so that they have an understanding of the power and what can be done with them. But they also have an obligation to educate themselves about governance. Now, in fairness, I will say I'm really excited to announce the launch of our AI Trust Leadership Certificate Program. We're doing this in conjunction with the Chief Executive Group and Corporate Board Member Network that has 95,000 public and private company CEOs, board members, and CFOs, because we noticed that there was this gap here, and we need to get a governance framework and structure to our CEO and board community so they can do what they do best, which is focus on strategy. There's a system to this, and we can talk about that more later. We call it trust, but there is an absolute way to manage and understand these technologies so that the best results can come out for the company.
Nice.
When I think of AI, sometimes, we think it's going to amplify everything, right? In some way or another. It could amplify problems, but we want it to amplify, innovation and things like that. What do you say to someone who's, worried about any kind of constraints that responsible AI may put on them? I know in the Silicon Valley, like to break things and, move fast and all that. But what do you say to trying to balance this?
Yeah, what I say is this is really just great business. This is about quality control, and it's about the providers of the technology educating their customers about the needs. And I'm seeing this more and more. I just saw one of the major tech companies make an announcement at Davos that the customers need to take a role in developing data governance. They need to also understand where their data is so they can get the best out of the provider's technology. The future of AI will not exist in individuals doing, creating images or researching things on their own. The future of AI is with enterprise deployment. And when we have failure rates and error rates in our the raw provider tools that have been, according to their model system cards that came out last year, we're in error anywhere between 26% and 79% of the time. So left totally raw in a company that's deploying on these tools, a bank, a financial institution, an insurance company, a healthcare provider, just going raw with no governance when you can call it responsible AI, but I just call it quality control. If you don't do anything to just balance out those error rates, yeah, you're going to have some major eggs laid all over your clients, all over your employees and stakeholders and the investors. The other part of this is that investors like BlackRock, proxy advisors, Glass Lewis, ISS, are concerned that our CEO and board community may not be focused on strategy, because if you have these major errors, AI cursing out customers, that happened to one major logistics company over in the UK. We have a situation where 64 million employee records exposed because of the vendor's AI, causing a 7% stock drop for a major quick service food restaurant here in the US. This is jeopardizing the investment that investors are making. So this is not a something to do to feel good. It's about getting the best out of this investment. We're investing trillions in this, and we want trillions to come out of it. And quality control is just a basic bottom line that we have to look towards. But 79% failure rate will not work for any bank or insurance company that I've
No. Yeah, you mentioned kind of getting like customers involved and getting these different stakeholders involved. And this is really kind of where I think, AI needs to be, is this sort of conscious capitalist approach, right? To where it's getting all these stakeholders, taking on each of those perspectives and making decisions based on that. How do you get AI and companies to be more human-centered in their governance, so that they're considering these kind of conscious capitalist sort of when it's out there in the wild doing its thing?
In our company, we created what we call a trust framework. And what it is just a roll up of all of the best practices in 100 countries, 6 continents, and then focusing on case studies to see where have most of the successes come out of and where have the errors been more prevalent. And we landed on these 5 areas that seem to be, when these 5 areas are present, success happens. And when any one of these 5 areas is missing, not too far from it is an AI incident that has caused either financial or strategic interruption to a company. And so we focus our board members and our CEOs on those 5 areas. There are many other things in all these different laws, and there's some frameworks called NIST and other things that you could focus on, thousands of KPIs, but only 5 of them that we've seen really matter. So we want to focus our leaders on those 5 that are responsible for like 85% of the failure rates, and then focus there to get those under control. Trust, we talk about it on our website, and my 4th book, which is called Trust, Responsible AI, Innovation, Privacy, and Data Leadership, goes into it in detail, but at a very high level. It's about making common sense triage decisions. Why are we deploying AI? Do we have AI use cases that actually align with our mission, actually align with our strategic perspective? That's the triage part of AI, to ensure that we have the right AI use cases. Also, to ensure that we have thought through, is this something that has any measurable financial, operational, or business strategic benefit to our company? Because what's happening around all around the world, not just in the US, but pilot programs are almost like science projects invading the enterprise. But at the end of the day, there's really nothing that can come out of it, because it's not focused on what is really going to drive revenue, operations, or strategy in the company. So getting some discipline there is really key and critical. Another thing to think about is, are there legal obligations here that we need to be aware of and take care of those at the front end? So that's just to make sure you're getting out the gates with the right AI use cases, even in the company.
So, the next question, can you share those 5 things, or do we have to pick up the book? Where can we find it?
Okay. I talk about all this on my website. There's we have a drop-down menu that says frameworks, and the trust framework is there. So don't feel like you have to take notes on this. But the T in trust stands for triage. We go into all the metrics and KPIs around that, but it's a very straightforward process to make sure you've got the right use cases that you're focusing on. The R in trust has to do with the right data to train. It's about the training aspect. Sometimes clients will say to me, well, I can't control everything that's on the whole wide internet, or I can't control what Microsoft or Google or other companies have put before us in the raw models. And the reality is that's not necessary. They're bringing in the whole wide internet and operationalizing that to you in terms of the generative AI and the large language models. But what the company that's using this for an enterprise purpose, what they can do is control that the data that they're using in their applications that are built on top of the large language models, that data is accurate. That will go a long way to balancing out the error rates that I mentioned. The U in trust, this part is critical. where we see so many failures, and this could have been the thing that would save defeat here, is uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing. That is the U in trust. And customers and clients sometimes ask me, where are we going to get the standards? And this is so hard to do. And I always say, before this went to AI, there was a human doing these things, right? So whatever you would have told the most junior employee, that needs to be coded in the AI itself. Go to the expert employee at your company that had that job the most recent, or doing that task, that workflow, the most recent one, and find out what does accurate look like? What is the correct process for this? And make sure that that is coded as a testing guardrail, so that that's constantly pinging in the background. As we were talking before we got on, I'm doing this from Paris right now. I have an iPhone, and my home is in Los Angeles. I can see messages, push notifications when a window is open or my backside gate is open. And that's because I have sensors on my windows. But if I had that's a silent test going on in the background. The accurate state is everything's closed when I'm not home. But if we don't have any sensors on my windows, I could come back and find a squatter in my living room for 3 weeks. Which happened to many people in Los Angeles, by the way. So the point is that this is that the uninterrupted testing is the eyeballs that the company needs to be able to ensure their quality control is intact. The S in trust has to do with supervising humans. Once you are notified of a deviation, and let me just pause here, deviations will occur. Hallucinations are not aberrations. They will happen. We want hallucinations on good things because they'll bring correlations that will delight people, cures for different diseases and so forth. But on the flip side, there are going to be hallucinations that have impact on brands. So you want to be alerted to those immediately if that is happening, so that the supervising humans that SWAT team can jump into action and go fix the model. What will they need for that? They're going to need the last T in trust, technical documentation. If they don't have any logging data, metadata, and technical docs about what data was used to train the model and what uninterrupted testing results revealed, they'll never know when the model started to drift, when it started to degrade, and diagnose the problem to fix it. And these are things that large language model experts, generative AI academics have talked to legislators around the world about, but we haven't done the best job in explaining this to our CEO and board community. And that's the mission and purpose of my company, to make sure that that is explained and then addressed. But it's not a complex thing to do. We just need to know how to do it.
Yeah. Before we started inviting guests to this show, Steve and I spent almost 10 months talking about the impact empathy would have in many companies and many organizations. We even uncovered a bunch of really horrible outcomes, companies that got sued by the government for billions of dollars for just doing really unethical things. And we dissected them and thought, what would their business model would have looked like if they had actually applied empathy into their business model? And one thing that came through every time is empathy is always going to help guide a company better than anything else. So I'm just curious, before we move on to our purpose questions, which is one of the things we ask every guest, can leaders and how can leaders integrate empathy and ethical reasoning into a data-driven decision-making? Because sometimes the data, it can be cold, right? So when you guide these leaders, what are some of the common thread insights that you could share that's like, this is what you need. This is how you also bring in ethics and empathy into this process. It doesn't have to be mechanical or clinical. It can be elevated to be human grade. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think we are entirely capable of embedding our values, our mission, our purpose into these technologies. And we just have to be rigorous about that. What I tell clients is that given the error rates that I mentioned to you in the raw model systems cards from our providers. And that's not going to change anytime soon. There's some MIT studies that hallucinations are not something that are going to just go away over time, that this is probably endemic to the technology. So knowing that, when you're making an important decision that could impact your employees, your customers, for employees, their jobs, or their ability to rise up in the organization or to even get hired, for your customers, if we're talking about the quality of a product, whether you're in healthcare, finance, insurance, or just retail, right? Thinking about what would it feel like if what I give this customer is like wrong, it's against our standards. Putting yourself in the shoes as a CEO and a board member of your customers, and also from your investors. Think about it from their perspective. They're on track to give 9 figures this year, 300 billion in investments to various organizations that are moving down this path of integrating generative AI into their processes. You think about it from their standpoint, getting a return on that and working towards a common good rather than having what we had with cyber, 60 trillion in cyber attacks cost our global economy $60 trillion over the past 10 years. We don't want to replicate that again at scale with with AI. We had an opportunity with cyber 25 years ago to avoid it. We didn't. But now we are with AI, where this could be cyber at scale, whole bunch of losses after our global economy is really depending on AI being great. We need to work and make it that way. So the empathy is really thinking long term about how do we put out the very best product we can. That doesn't need to take time. It needs to take curiosity to get to results. We try to roll all that up and create a blueprint and a roadmap in our company. So the clients have a North Star, and they have a path that they can actually follow to get to great results. But it's like anything else. You have to put attention on making sure that there are great results, not just keeping it as something sort of more hazy like ethics, but more focusing on how can we give the best quality product out there to our customers and experience to our employees and our investors that we possibly can. And I think many of our CEOs and boards are committed to that, and it's our job to get them that path.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of developed this great system with the trust system that you talked about. Like when Tullio was mentioning when we were looking at these companies where these breakdowns happened, it was on, if you look at systems as various parts of it breaking down, ultimately it was probably related to like a lack of empathy, like, feedback loops and things were broken in that they didn't want to hear. But it's like, if a leader doesn't have empathy, the team breaks down. A team without empathy, the culture breaks down. The culture without empathy, the company breaks down. Company without empathy, and the marketplace can break down. You got like an example of like Purdue Pharma, where you see all this stuff just break down.
Those examples were wild. I mean, VW, they were given the EPA mandates, and instead of fixing that, they fidgeted with the software to make it look like they made it, and they got fined $1 billion. I mean, just dumb stuff.
It all kind of comes back to those systems that are in place, or the rigidity or something that doesn't allow care to come through at some level or another. We've got a couple.
If they were like, let's do right by the planet, that probably would have not existed. Let's just do the right thing.
Exactly. And just really focusing on those values and making sure that instead of apologizing 25 years from now, or even 5 years from now, from all the various issues and incidents, let's start from the beginning of just building it with these safeguards in mind. And it's totally possible to build in everything that I talked to you about. Does have a technology corollary. It does need to be embedded in the tech. Otherwise, it is absolutely useless. So anybody who's listening and has an AI governance team where everybody's meeting and they're getting frustrated in meetings and silos are developing, and then on top of that, none of that is getting in the tech, you're actually creating that time bomb, that ticking time bomb in your company that nobody wants to be the poster child for. So the last thing I'll say, the empathy needs to draw groups together. I noticed when I come into many companies that there are established silos. The IT's over here, the subject matter experts are over here, the legal's over here, and they're all being advised by different advisors. The CEO is working with another advisor, the board's working with, and you basically have multiple languages being spoken and people not working together. And if the right hand is not, if the chief information officer is not getting together with the CFO to find out what data is necessary to make the AI successful and for which the revenue of the organization depends, if that conversation isn't happening, then right then and there, you're already on a path to come up with something that's going to be a waste of an investor's money. So these are the types of things we need to just be really open and honest with each other about so that we can put out amazing stuff.
Yep.
All right, we got 5 minutes left. We need a lot more.
We have a couple audience questions too, though.
Well, we have a couple of audience questions, and then we have 2 final questions from ourselves. Let's see if we can squeeze them in the time we have left. Okay, this is a great question from the audience on LinkedIn. In your book, Trust, you talk about turning regulatory complexity into competitive advantage. Can you share a real-world example of how a company or board has used responsible AI governance to drive growth or avoid major risks? And I need new glasses.
Yes, well, that's such a great question. And, I'm thinking right now, a good example. There is a woman up in Northern California, Shyla, and she is about 2 years ago, shortly after ChatGPT 4 came out, was feeling pain, didn't really know what was going on, something with her back. Her doctors couldn't diagnose it. Her husband took her x-rays and had an AI company put her x-rays through his AI tool. They had early detection of cancer. She is now cancer-free with her grandkids, a great outcome with rigor in place. Another example, and I give these healthcare examples because it really cuts to what is so important in life. We have Genomics AI, and one of the members of my Trust Coalition, Malik Ninji, was one of the founders of that. They basically used AI to be able to have early detection of generative diseases that afflict people all around the world. That he controlled the data going in and controlled the data going out, a brilliant data scientist, but working with that rigor has had great results for curing generative diseases and finding early treatments and therapies for others. Just had a collaboration with Eli Lilly for $409 million. So there's a lot of great benefits that come from focusing on the quality. You can work just as hard on something that is going to lay eggs for the company later than working hard on something with the requisite redundancies in place and protections in place so that you have a great product. So it is so much more empowering for employees to be in that environment than work so hard and come out with something that lands the company on the headlines because the AI has recommended something terrible with encouraging eating disorder, kids afflicted with eating disorders to go on diet, for example.
Amazing. We've got one more from the audience, but before we do that, let's get through our 2 questions that we have left, and then we'll squeeze this one in.
Tullio, I'm good squeezing in, and then we'll just let's
do it. Okay, let's do it. Go ahead. Okay, so looking ahead, what excites you the most about the future of AI and data innovation?
I'm excited because, at Davos just last week, we had our CEO from MasterCard, CEO from multiple CEOs from multiple companies coming forward and saying, look, trust is key and critical to the successful deployment of generative AI in enterprise. That is a major realization and a great sort of problem awareness that everyone is now on the same page and understanding. I can't say that was the case 3 years ago, but that recognition that we need to have change management and process in order to bring out and orchestrate the best in this technology, that is understood. So I'm really excited to see where we go with this. The Trust Barometer report that came out from Edelman PR notified that there is very low trust in AI right now, but that means we have the opportunity to go up from here. And I'm excited to bring what we're doing at Global Data Innovation to the world at scale, solutions for preventing AI incidents and building quickly at scale great products. So that's what I'm most excited about in the future.
I want to ask you what you're scared about the most in the future, but I know there's a lot of doomsday scenarios out there with AI. But
none of those will happen if we do what we're talking about here correctly. And I'm very confident of that. When I looked at the statistics and what we have in our database, like I said, over 1 million weighted unique attributes, and multiple aspects of different case studies. We know how to control this. So it's a question of getting the message out of how to do it and then doing it. And I do believe that our CEO and board community want to get control over this. I get questions constantly. What questions should I ask? Who should be responsible for governance? We just did a white paper last year. People are starving for this information, and I'm excited that there's a way to solve this. If this was an unsolvable problem, then I'd be scared of it, Stephen. But because we have a solve, I'm excited by the challenge to get do talk shows like this and others to get the word out about how we can prevent all this stuff and not go into a whole 2 decades like we did with cyber of losses.
So I ask a lot of CEOs and business leaders what role love should play in business. Let me ask a variation of that. What role should love play in our use of AI in business?
We use AI in my company, and I started the company because of love. The love I have for our customers, the love I have for our society, and the love I have for business and what the possibilities for business to play a pivotal role in elevating everyone's lives. And so it just pains my heart for the 33 years that I spent in big law, de-risking companies at their most vulnerable moments after one disastrous data breach after another, and headlines, and what that does to morale in a company. That's when I knew, when I could see we were going down the same path with AI, that paralysis, and whether we are going to interrupt innovation or we're going to build it correctly, and that frozen. And I thought, oh my goodness, we're going to do the whole cyber thing again at scale with AI. And it just can't happen because we have our elder community to protect, our children, our students, our healthcare patients, and our financial stability, both in investments as well as our companies, depends on us getting this right. So that's why I'm excited. I started my company to address this out of love, to make sure that we have excellence with our technology and not digging from the dredges from incident after terrible incident.
Yeah, I love that. We've really got to work on those foundational systems, right? And right now, because if the foundation isn't trust or empathy or love, then everything on top of that becomes fragile and even dangerous.
Exactly.
What a great conversation. We could have gone for a lot longer. So much to unpack and so much wisdom you've shared. Thank you so much for being with us, Dominique. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Go to our website. It's globaldatainnovation.com, and reach out on the contact page, sign up for our newsletter. You'll get bi-weekly, twice a week, we send out a newsletter with tips on how to address these things, totally free of charge. So I'm looking forward to everyone being part of this trust journey in this community.
Thank you, Dominique, for joining us today. Thank you to our audience for your questions and joining us and listening. And, building trust isn't about slowing progress. It's about ensuring progress serves people. So we will see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.